The nation's universities have warned Australians will suffer a lower standard of living if the government pushes ahead with its proposed cap on international student numbers. In a speech in Canberra this week, the chair of Universities Australia, David Lloyd, argued the sector had become a political plaything. And to discuss this, I'm joined by Scott Davies, a consultant and principal at Higher Education Advisory, and former Chief of Staff to Education Minister Jason Clare. Scott, thank you for joining me.
Fiona, thanks for having me.
The government wants to slash the intake to 270,000. How much of an economic hit will that have?
Let me just say at the outset, I've got a number of universities that are my clients, but I'm not speaking on behalf of any of them today. But the thing that we should talk about the numbers, the caps, is that, yes, it will have a significant economic effect, but it will also have a significant effect on immigration, which is blown out by 25% over what was predicted. That's the fundamental underlying reason that this has to occur.
And so how do you weigh up this plan? What are the positives and the negatives?
Yeah, well, look, the simplest way to look at this is that the Australian population wants to bring immigration to a reasonable level. And so what this does is it fairly allocates the numbers of international students amongst different universities in order to make sure that everyone gets a slice of the pie, but no one is over-reliant on them. So it's a regulation process. It's been an unregulated industry until this point.
Now, the Coalition has linked international student numbers to the housing crisis. We saw Peter Dutton pledge student caps earlier this year in his budget reply speech. To what extent is this plan necessary, and to what extent is it political?
There's policy, there's politics, and there's political point scoring. And the housing element of this, I believe, is just political point scoring. I don't think there is any implications on housing. But the one thing I do believe is that housing is linked to immigration in the minds of Australians. And so therefore, the Coalition is doing what it would rely upon as being a way in order to attack the Labor government here. So that's why the Coalition is regarded as tough on immigration. The Labor Party has to be tough on immigration, and this is a mechanism of doing so.
So as far as you're aware, there's no evidence that suggests this would have a meaningful impact on housing supply?
I don't think there is evidence to suggest that at all.
Now, under this proposal, each institution would have a certain quota of students allocated to them. The largest unis would see the biggest cuts. What is that about?
The way in which these quotas are derived is that it looks at the numbers of international students that each university has now and looks at it in terms of what they had a couple of years ago. And therefore, the largest cuts are usually to those universities that have the most numbers. Now, you have some universities which do not have very many international students at all, and you have some universities which have up to 40% of their entire student population is international students. That is why the bigger ones are going to get the larger cuts, just simply because of the numbers that they already hold.
But do you think if people coming from overseas who want to go to an Australian university, if they can't get into one of those bigger, better-known unis, do you think they'll choose to go elsewhere?
I do think those universities have spent a lot of time and effort ensuring that they've developed programs that are attractive to international students, that their rankings are such on a global basis that international students do want to come here for those particular institutions. Perhaps some of those students won't want to come to Australia at all, but there may be students that do come to go to other institutions.
Now, the government has been coming under attack from the Coalition over immigration. I'll read you something that Professor Lloyd said in his speech this week, accusing Labor of limiting enrolments in a bid to neutralise the perceived political damage it is suffering from high migration rates. Now, is there any truth to that?
David Lloyd says it's perception. I say it's reality. That's exactly why the government has moved in regard to this. It's moved in order to make the industry sustainable, the migration associated with it sustainable, and the products that we produce for our students, both domestic and international, appropriate and good for universities into the future.
What percentage of students in Australia are actually international students?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And again, it depends from university to university. As I said, there are some universities which have up to 40% international students, and lots of other regional universities have many, many fewer international students.
Do you think that perhaps the sector is over-reliant on international students and that makes us vulnerable to global shocks like we saw with the pandemic?
I think the sector has used the system as the system was written. Universities have done nothing wrong. What they've tried to do is ensure that they can supplement the income that they have in order to be able to help educate other students, domestic students, and do research and development in Australia with the income that they get from foreign students. Absolutely no problem with that at all, but they've done it and maxed out. And now what the Australian government are seeking to do is develop a system which is sustainable now and into the future.
We'll have to see how it goes. Scott Davies, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much.